Tonight, I want to recall some experiences that I've had canoeing. And I thought I'd take just a few minutes and tell you about that little segment of my life, those few years that I did some canoeing, and it was canoeing on Big Creek over in Round Valley. That particular creek, if you've ever been to Round Valley, over by Bear Lake, it crosses the Round Valley Road where it starts off to Meadowville, goes under a culvert there, and it actually originates a little further west, up in the foothills in the Johnson Ranch, and kind of runs down through the Johnson Ranch and the Curl Ranch and on down through some other people's property until eventually it gets to the lake, crosses under the main highway down a couple of miles down the road. But anyway, I lived in that area and was always quite intrigued when we'd go out that way, because Round Valley itself was quite a picturesque little valley. It was meadow hay, and it attracted a lot of waterfowl type birds, egrets and sand-hilled cranes and different kinds of geese, snow geese and Canadian geese, and just a lot of different wetland birds. I don't know why, but I've always had kind of an affinity towards wetlands. I think it originated maybe from my farm days. Down on the dairy farm, we had a slough. I think I've mentioned it in some of the uploads, that ran down through our property, and there were some of those same wetland birds down there. Different kinds of ducks, and it was a feeling more than anything else. And out there, especially if you didn't catch it on a weekend when there might be more travel in the summer, but it was very peaceful. And I always enjoyed just going out there and sometimes just sitting on the culvert, watching the water go under the road and out into the fields and on down through the country. It was called Big Creek, and it actually looked like a pretty big creek. It was, I don't know how many yards across there where I'm describing by the road, but it would be maybe 45 yards or something like that in spots. There's places down below where it narrowed to just 8 or 10 feet. So already you're probably starting to wonder, well, how could that be? and I'll tell you. So I thought, as I sat there and watched, that it would be nice to float that creek in a canoe. It wasn't rapid. It was just a gentle flow to the creek. And I don't know, there's just something appealing about it. So I started looking for a canoe, and eventually I found one. I found it was a black Coleman canoe that had aluminum framing, and I thought would work out fine. It had seats on each end, and I thought would be durable enough. For me, I don't know how much I would have weighed. I've never been a lightweight, but I wanted to do it, and I wanted to do it with my children. And I was able to get them to go with me quite a few times. I don't know if any of them watch this, if they'll remember the experience, because I'm not so sure I did it with all of them. I can't remember. But there for a while, it was kind of the thing to do if we had a little extra time. And it was, the canoe was such that I could slip it in the back of my pickup truck. And if it stuck out the end, that was fine. I'd just tie it with a rope. And up the road we'd go. And I'd usually have somebody come with me, because when we took the canoe out up where we put it in, up on the west end of Round Valley where it crossed the road, the creek did, I would have somebody unload us there and then drive down to a pickup spot that was maybe a mile away, roughly. And it was a little deceiving, because right there where it came under the road through the culvert, I could see fish down in there, and I've even caught trout, some nice trout off of that culvert, and it just looked like a great little fishing stream there from the road. But if you put in the canoe and you go out just a little ways, one of the things you find out is that it gets shallow very, very fast. Like within 25 yards out from there, you're looking at the bottom of the creek bed, and it's only maybe a foot below your boat. But it widens out. And so the creek looks big, but it's very shallow right there anyway. And it goes quite shallow for some time. Some of my children will probably remember, if they listen to this, especially if we had 2 or 3 in at a time, they would, there'd be enough weight in the boat that when we get to certain points in the stream, you'd hit the bottom. So I soon learned to attach ropes to the front end, and I can remember rolling up my pant legs and climbing out of the canoe and throwing the rope up over my shoulder and pulling them through those spots where it was hitting the bottom. So it doesn't sound like your regular canoeing experience, but it really was a lot of fun. And after you got down a little further, it got a little deeper. The sides of the stream narrowed up and it made it deeper. And a little bit further down, it actually got to where it was maybe 6 feet deep or so, because the stream sides narrowed up considerably. But I remember, like I said, canoeing. I'd have to give them a little canoeing lesson, and I had to learn myself first, because I wasn't an aquatics person, let's put it that way. But it was a lot of fun, and we learned to canoe. One first stroke on one side and the other one stroke on the back, and you could keep it going straight. But what was interesting about it is, as you went down along the stream, the creek, Big Creek, there would be a lot of carp, and they were quite large. And at certain times of the year, they would have a breeding season, I guess, when they'd lay their eggs and different things, and you'd see them kind of splashing in the side of the embankments along the stream. And if you happen to go around a turn and sneak up on them, and then they saw you, they'd all just thrash the water, and away they'd go and create a lot of waves. And the kids got thought that was a big deal. They got a lot of excitement out of that. The other thing that was fun to watch, there were the birds, like the different blackbird, the red-winged blackbird, and the gold-headed, it's a gold-headed blackbird. It has a more official name, I think, than that. But they make different sounds in the spring than they do the rest of the year. It's kind of like meadowlarks, and there were some of those there too. But they just sing different and prettier in the spring of the year than they do any other time. If you haven't experienced that, then you haven't been out in the wetlands in the spring of the year as opposed to other times of the year, because there's definitely a difference. And all of those sounds were coming in, and it was so quiet. And it was usually in the evening, so there'd be, some colorful clouds and things like that that would help. Sometimes it was in the mornings. But it was just a lot of fun for the kids to be able to round a corner and see those fish. And then quite often, especially like in the first part of June, you'd round a corner and you'd see some Canadian geese that would be nesting right next to the stream bed. And quite often you'd surprise them, and they'd go honking off into the distance and concerned that you were going to disturb their eggs or their nest. And so they'd circle around and come back in, and you could just lay back and watch all of that. Some of you may not appreciate those kind of moments, but for me, and I hope it spilled over into with the kids too, is that, and grandkids, some of them, that they were able to just feel alive, is maybe the way I'd say it, just feel alive in nature, so that you weren't apart from it, but alive in it, is the best way I could describe it. It was meaningful to me, and I think I knew it would be, because that's the reason I wanted the canoe in the first place. I still have that canoe, by the way, even over here in Cache Valley where we live now. I still have the canoe. I don't use it much, and we're wondering whether how to sell it or what to do with it. But when I look at it, it brings back a lot of memories. And there'd be places where we'd go down along the stream and we'd see all those things, and sometimes we'd see a red fox, because they like to hunt in those areas too. Like I said, there's just something about the wetlands that brings all the critters to life and together. And it was a lot of fun. Anyway, we'd get down there, and then sometimes there'd be there was one place in particular where there was a couple of culverts that went under an overpass. Now, when I say overpass, don't think freeway overpass, because this is just a place where a man could drive a team of horses and a wagon across, and a farmer had put a couple of big culverts in to take care of the stream where that was. When you came to those, I was always tempted to see if I could duck down and go under, but I knew that would be a stupid thing to do, because if I got partway under and got caught, the water would start to back up and build up, and I knew what the outcome of that would be, an early demise. So I always told my children about it too, if they ever went alone, to make sure they got out of the boats, those places, hauled the canoe up over the embankment, and then put it in again down on the other side, so that they wouldn't have to risk that. There was things like muskrats too, and they'd be building their houses, swimming in the water and sitting on the embankments. It's hard for me to describe. But we would usually paddle very, very leisurely. That was the goal for me. There was no speed contest on it at all. It was only about a mile to where we'd pick up, and there was a little... it's a place where a backhoe had come in and diverted the river over to where they could pump out of it for the Laketown irrigation system, and so it kind of went over by the highway where the power pole was, and that's where we'd paddle up that little diversion, and it would get us right close to the road where we could then get out of the canoe and pick up and haul it up to the truck. And there was something else that was kind of interesting right there where we'd pick up. There was a pipe that came down across the road, and it ran some water, and it ran it into this stream that I was telling about, this diversion stream. and it was fun to watch, because if you settled into it and watched, you'd see the fish start to get there, and they'd try to, the trout had an impulse to swim upstream, and they would come over to that, and they'd try to jump up into that pipe because that's where the water was coming from. Not too many of them made it into the pipe, and if they did, they got washed out. But it was just interesting that their instincts told them to go upstream, no matter where it was. And it was fun to watch it with the kids and see that happen. And on occasion, I sometimes didn't take the kids on this part of the trip, but I believe I took some of them when they got a little older. We would continue on down Big Creek and probably go another half a mile or 3/4 of a mile, clear down there, and finally hit Highway 30. It was that was coming through the valley and on up Lake Town Canyon. And that, maybe it wasn't Highway 30. I forgot the name of the highway. Anyway, we'd paddle the canoe down, and I had to go through some barbed wire fences, which was a little bit tricky in a canoe because you'd have to find a place where the barbs were, or the wire was broken or down a little bit, and then you'd have to kind of lift up and work your way under. And it was worth the effort because once you were on the other side, you were free to go for another several hundred yards. And then finally we'd get down to where the road was, and somebody would pick us up down there and take us home. So that's the canoeing experience I had on Big Creek. The only regret that I have now is that I didn't do more of it and for longer with more kids and grandkids involved. Seems like they get to a certain age and they have so many things going on that we'd kind of we were going here and going there and trying to follow them and facilitate all the activities and the work schedules and different things. And I just wish that I'd taken more time and thrown that canoe in the back and headed off to Big Creek a few more times. Those quiet times in nature, as I have said before, are so, so meaningful. Something changes in your soul when you're in those kind of situations that's just different. And I don't think that's just me. It might be, but I don't think so. I think other people that would have experienced that would have felt a lot of the same feelings. So now I'm over here to Cache Valley. And the house that I live in has one of the main reasons I live here. Well, one is that my daughter lived next door, and I thought we'd have a house next to her. However, they've moved since we moved here, so that didn't work out just like we had planned. But one of the other reasons that I moved here was because in the back of my house here, and it's up on the east side of the valley, up on the hill where I can see the Wellsville Mountains. And this time of the year, they're just beautiful because they're snow-capped and they're starting to be green in the valleys. And we're up here on a cul-de-sac where it's quiet. That's another reason it's a little quieter on cul-de-sacs. We have good neighbors. But the most cherished part of the place for me, aside from the people that live here, my wife, is that I live so that I can, if I go out on my back porch and I look up east toward the mountains, and there's places where I can see the mountains through the trees, but it's the trees. There are a lot of trees. My wife has said, why don't you go up there and trim them up and make them look more refined groomed, I guess is the word she would use. And I've always resisted that a little bit, though I don't mind hauling off dead ones and thinning a little bit. I've always liked just the natural look of things. And we have a group of trees in the front of our place too, on the other side of our house. And I've just kind of let it grow. I haven't trimmed much or pruned much, other than just enough to keep it off the cars that I park out there. Occasionally I have to cut a branch. But I just like things to look natural and wild. I think a lot of that stems back from some of these days that I've had when I had some cherished moments in nature. Because when I sit on my back deck, and there's a little place off the master bedroom where my wife and I have chairs and we can sit and look, and we see those trees and different seasons of the year, all the different kinds of birds that come, hummingbirds and crows and magpies and all the little chickadee type birds that I don't have names for, but they're all a little different, and they all have their own ways, their own sounds, their own likes and dislikes, their own times and seasons. And I just like sitting out there and have a little bit of a rocker chair on both of them. Some chairs that we picked up from Desert Industries that we just rock on a little bit. Now in our old age, we rock on a little bit and we look at the trees. We have pheasants in our backyard, quail, and coyotes that we can hear at night up above the house that yap, yap, yap when they get into groups. It's fun for me to listen to. Makes me feel like even though I'm in the city, there's a little bit of wildness, a little bit of the natural way of things trying to seep in and still communicate with me. And I love it. It's meaningful. So I thought it would be worthwhile for me to just talk to you about some of those things and kind of let you know, and maybe bring back some memories for some of you that experienced it. And if you want to experience it yet, I still have the canoe, and you can start where I did and continue on from there, feeling the love. I hope you do feel the love. Good night.